Master Duel is officially out, and while it might be a smaller title compared to other things this year, it was one I was no less excited about. Being marketed as the most accessible, easiest way of getting in the TCG, I was instantly hooked, and it was free to boot. I was really skeptical of that model from the outset, but with the most advanced graphics in Yu-Gi-Oh! History, every single card in the TCG, and a bunch of cosmetic features to boot, it seemed like the next step forward for Yu-Gi-Oh! So let's take a look at this game and ask ourselves the question, how good is Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel? In short, the game's a bit of a mixed bag. Now, I want to stress that we're talking about Master Duel upon release, so the content in the game could potentially change while it receives continued support. Hell, it may even stay the same, but just know that this is basically the 1.0 build of Master Duel that we're looking at today. It's got a lot going for it, but it definitely has some problems that people should be talking about. But as usual, let's start with the things I like about the game. First things first, Master Duel is gorgeous. This game makes a pretty good first impression. All the UI is really clean looking, the menus are easy to read and comb through, and I'm really impressed with the way it looks. This is the first Yu-Gi-Oh! Game to have really nice HD graphics, going as far as even having 4K support. And that alone makes Master Duel visually such a crowd pleaser. A lot of people were critical of Duel Links and Legacy of the Duelist for the low-res JPEG-ness of their presentation, and while I don't necessarily agree with that for Duel Links, the HD graphics are a welcome addition. Sometimes it's hard to remember that the monster art dotting the game's menus wasn't made specifically for this game, and you can really appreciate the new monster designs because of how clean they look. The menus also have this really cool blurring effect from time to time, and it makes it look really cool. I can't properly describe why I like this little detail, but it's just super easy on the eyes for me, and I'm happy it's here. Moving on to Dueling, they're really beautiful. All the way from the coin flip to the final hit, everything looks incredibly crisp, and I found myself mainly going back to it just to play in these gorgeous arenas. The arenas are also incredibly customizable. You can completely change the look of your side of the duel field, card sleeves, icon, and key art with what's presumably going to become a library of cosmetics in the shop. You can also set a buddy to sit by your side and cheer for you while you duel. They don't have too much purpose aside from looking cool, but they don't need to do anything. And there's a ton of variety, from iconic cards like Ash Blossom and Dark Magician to fun little additions like cars and roller skates. You can also set your duel field through the deck editor, so your strategy will always have the perfect aesthetic backing it up. I personally went for the Ancient Gear set for nostalgia reasons, but I get really excited thinking about what other buddies or cosmetics will eventually be available. Moving on to the cards themselves, they're all well-defined and well-animated. I do have an issue or two with the way they're presented, but we'll get back to that later, because the cards feel incredibly good to use. I especially like that you can snap cards to whatever places you want them, and if there's only one possibility like setting traps, the game will automatically do that action for you. I'd be really interested to see how this game plays on a PlayStation or something that you need a controller for, because it feels pretty good on PC. The cards themselves are also animated really well across all varieties. I was a little worried that less used mechanics like pendulum and ritual cards would be left to dry, but every type of cards have their own embellishments that make them feel unique. And chaining cards together is really satisfying as you watch your action stack cards up the screen. All the monster cards have different attack animations based on their attribute, and the game really loves to embellish a potentially winning blow. Playing powerful cards is very satisfying too. While there's no 3D graphics for the cards themselves, particularly strong or iconic cards will these animated sequences play as they're summoned, and I think this idea is so much better. I think it's a much better way to make the player feel good about themselves than what they've done in other games. Especially when compared to Legacy of the Duelist 3D models, I can definitely say less is more here. Playing strong cards can also completely shift the music in the duel, which brings us to the music. And the music's,
Goku wa doi desu ka?
Watashi ga kangayattita. Kiku.
Yeah, it's pretty damn good. I was expecting this game to have the same EDM or synth music that Konami's leaned on in their more recent titles, but it's all incredibly diverse. The music ranges from these vaguely Egyptian motifs that create a foreboding atmosphere to loud orchestral tracks. It just feels so wonderful, and I would occasionally just stop in the single-player mode to listen to the music. While I can't recommend doing that in online matches for obvious reasons, I definitely recommend putting the soundtrack on if you can find it anywhere. Especially the tracks for the single-player mode, which is a great segue to the single-player mode, which was actually a lot more comprehensive than I was expecting. As opposed to being story-based on events from the anime, this game focuses on the lore of the cards themselves, letting you test out the strategies they use, and even getting your hands on a starter deck themed around them. It's nowhere near perfect, don't get me wrong, but it'll get the job done. And you'll leave the solo mode with some cards and strategies you may not have even heard of. So, the visuals are great, the gameplay is great, the music is great, everything seems great. So what's the problem with the game? While this game is a lot of fun, it's not without its fair share of problems. Some of them are small and others are a lot bigger. So let's start with the small things and work our way up. These things aren't really big issues, but they're just a few things I've noticed that take some getting used to. Firstly, I don't know whether it's just me, but it feels like this game is missing a few things on PC. It's got a little bit of weirdness here and there. For some reason, the game still launches in window mode every single time you boot it up, which is nothing major. I can just go into the settings and change it, but I'm just confused, especially since the game saves your audio and dueling settings automatically. I don't know why, but I can't find the option to leave this game for the life of me. I figured it'd be in the settings, maybe on the bottom somewhere, but it just isn't. I imagine they didn't include these because console and phones already have ways to close games themselves, and it's not a huge hassle to auto-for when I'm done, but it feels really weird. Moving on to dueling, this is just a personal preference thing, but I wish you could have an option to see the full cards in your hand. I know this really isn't a big deal to most people, and it's not a big one to me either, but I just like being able to see the bottom of my cards and the little numbers. Now, the last of my criticisms are a little bit bigger, and I could honestly say them about most free-to-play games as a whole, but to start with, please, just let me download the whole game when I boot it up. Whether it's Brave Exvius, Pokemon, or even this game, they always throw you into the tutorial and make you wait to download to play the rest of it after you've beaten it. And honestly, this is one of the biggest pet peeves I have with free-to-play games. At least on PC I can leave it running and do something else, but I don't really have that luxury on something like a phone. More than likely, if I'm feeling good enough to play the tutorial, I'm already sold, so just put the 5 gig download at the front, and I'll have a much better first impression of the game. Diving a little bit into this game more, the deck builder is also really weird. I love how you can organize and basically make shopping lists of cards you want out of public decks or cards you find, but it's really cumbersome. The deck builder shows you presumably every card in existence at once, whether you have it or not. This is a pretty good idea on paper, especially considering the crafting system that I'll get to later, but it's not the most intuitive. Since you can see every card, which ironically isn't actually all the cards, there's too many things put in front of you that it becomes overwhelming. It's so much information that you don't know where to start sometimes. The cards can't be sorted in alphabetical order, and the filter options that are available honestly don't help that much. Veteran players might say that you just need to know what cards you want beforehand, but most returning or casual players who haven't played in a while might not have any idea where to start. You can learn to use the deck builder, yes, but I honestly think it needs some tweaking to be more inclusive to new players. Maybe there could be a catalog section of the deck builder where every single card goes, separating the cards you do and don't have. That exponentially lowers the number of cards you have to look through at once, and the developers could even add archetype-specific filters in that section to make it easier. These are just some thoughts on how the deck builder could be improved, and I think it would work to the game's benefit a lot. But as a whole, most of the issues are easy to get used to, if a little irritating. There is, however, one big issue that could absolutely be a deal breaker for some people. I think myself included. Let's talk about the free-to-play things that are in this game. First of all, I do want to stress that yes, you can technically play this game absolutely free. There's no initial buy-in, there's nothing making you spend money on this game, no one is forcing you to spend money. However, there are 3 separate in-game currencies you need to manage if you want to play this game. The first one are attribute orbs, a set of points for each of the 6 attributes that you spend in the single-player mode. They're not too terribly important, but they will slow you down at times if you don't have enough to progress. The places you want to get to with these orbs are usually optional, but it's still irritating to hit a roadblock because of them. The next one is gems, or U-Bucks, as my friends and I have affectionately been calling them. Honestly, I was really irritated by them to no end, but they're fine for what they are. The only real things I was mad about was the surprisingly low amount of pulls spending money actually earns you. Like seriously, 80 bucks earns you around 5 big pulls worth of cards, which feels tiny to me. Maybe I'm wrong in that, and it's actually accurate to the real world or something, but I just think that should be higher, especially since you can't buy cards. Speaking of, while you can't buy cards, you can make them using the game's crafting materials, which you can use to make cards, or you can get from selling cards you don't plan to use. I think it's a really good idea to be able to make the cards you want, or sell the ones you don't, but you really just don't get enough materials for it to be worth it. Dismantling cards only drops a max of 15 materials from what I've seen, and while the game gives you a decent amount at the start, you'll run out of points a lot faster than you thought. And especially if you don't know what cards you're looking for, you'll be cutting a loss anytime you're not meticulously working towards a strategy. The Battle Pass, which I'll get to in a second, also gives you such a low amount of rewards that it doesn't even feel worth checking for possible crafting materials at times. You also aren't even allowed to dismantle certain cards from the pre-built decks, meaning your only options are to pull cards, hope you get rare cards that you'll never use, then pawn them off to get what you really want. I think I have a few solutions for this though. If you let players pawn off their cards when they pull them instead of making players dig through the overwhelming card list, that'd go a pretty long way towards helping. And if you increase the rewards from the Battle Pass to say 30 points when you get them, that'd be even better. That way you either have the ability to put your winnings directly into more cards you want, or it's at least easier to get rid of the ones you don't. This would also help veteran players who know exactly what it is they want to run, and I honestly hope something like this can happen in the future. Lastly, the Battle Pass is fine, I guess, but I really couldn't say more than that. And similarly to other games, Master Duel has a progression system where you can passively earn rewards for playing online. And you can even upgrade it to a gold version with more rewards at only 600 U-Bucks. These passes so far will earn you crafting materials, U-Bucks, and other cosmetics, but while the cosmetics are kinda neat, the currency rewards are so paltry that they're almost unnoticeable. Even after upgrading the bonus rewards, you have to level up multiple ranks to be able to get any cards purely from what you earned in the Battle Pass, and it just feels like such a waste of time as a whole. Now I know there are folks who are loving Master Duel, and are having a great time with it, and I'm happy for you. I may think the monetization pressures players to pay up a little too much, but the core of this game is really cool. Once you do get some cards you can combo with, you can pull up some crazy things that would have cost a fortune had the cards been real, and I think that's great for the community. I can definitely imagine it being a staple game for the Yu-Gi-Oh community, and I think a Master Duel Nationals could be one of the best things for Yu-Gi-Oh since Duelings came out. So whether you agree or disagree with me, whether or not you got lucky pulls or had a bad experience like I did, I hope people enjoy the game while it's being supported, even though that pot of greed leaves a bad taste in my mouth.